Mythical archetypes and the mind. Mythical archetypes are the deep structures of the mind that shape how we experience, interpret, and create meaning in the world. Carl Jung introduced the concept of collective unconsciousness, a universal layer of the psyche that all humans share regardless of culture or upbringing. Within this collective unconsciousness resides archetypes, universal symbols, patterns, and roles such as the hero, the shadow, the wise old man, and the trickster, who surface in our dreams, stories, and myths. These archetypes are not learned from experience, but are innate, inherited templates guiding how we perceive ourselves and others and how we respond to challenges of life. Jung observed that these archetypes manifest in myths and folklores across vastly different cultures, explaining why so many societies independently produce similar stories and symbols. For example, the hero's journey, the wise mentor, and the battle with darkness are motifs that appear everywhere from ancient Greek epics to modern films like Star Wars. According to Jung, myths and the projections of these archetypes, giving form to the unconscious patterns within the mind and allowing individuals and societies to grapple with the universal human experiences. And this process is not static. Archetypes can overlap, combine, and adapt as they are expressed throughout different cultural lenses. The influence of archetypes on the mind is profound. They organize and inform our thoughts, behaviors, and even our dreams. On a personal level, engaging with archetypal, this is always a complicated word, imagery can help individuals achieve psychological integration and growth, a process Jung called individuation, another big word. On a collective level, shared archetypes in myth and art create a sense of unity and continuity across generations and cultures. By recognizing these deep-rooted patterns, we not only better understand ourselves, but also the stories that bind humanity together, reminding us that mythic mind is not just a relic of the past, but a living force shaping our present and future. So think of this. Think about stories, movies, or even dreams that have resonated with you deep. Which mythical archetypes, the hero, the mentor, the shadow, the trickster, do you see reflected in your own life or your world around you? How might recognizing these patterns help you better understand yourself and your own journey?
Significantly, the most important part of a dream is the nightmare, the shock. When the shock happens, there is a message. And that's the message of the conscious being that you are, attempting to get through the unconscious being that you mostly are, and connect to the inner self. So the shock is from the shadow, typically, and it's created by the archetype that we create. We put it on different characters that we view during the day through our lives. They become archetypes and we project them onto that screen. So we are accepting archetypes from media, archetypes from books, archetypes from our families, all of those. Like Santiago, your uncle was an archetype that would
exactly
go and kick ass on the monsters. That is an archetype. So I love those characters. My take now is, there are teachers, and they are the ones we have to figure out, especially with the dark archetypes, what is the message they're providing? They're trying to tell us something. Our unconscious is trying to communicate into our higher mind, and they're trying to say, wake up, wake yourself up. And I'm shocking you, so you will wake up. And so you have to find the good message that the dark force is trying to describe to you.
Yeah, I think that's key.
And that transmutation is what the magic is. That brings us into our connection alignment with our inner self that is connected to the universe, to the frequencies of life. So that's a powerful thing. My favorite archetype, though, is the phoenix. And that's like, Riza, you've experienced it dramatically. I've experienced it many times in my life where everything is stripped away and there's nothing left. And what do you do?
Let me just remind everybody that maybe do not know about the phoenix. What is the phoenix? The phoenix is a bird that once it gets old and it gets, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, once it's spent, I believe, let's use that word, it bursts into this fire, this, transformative fire that rejuvenates it, not gives it back, it transcends it. It destroys the past and it begins with a new one. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, you go as far as you can and you die. And then from the ashes, the phoenix is born.
The phoenix is reborn.
And the death is the ego death, obviously. Or it can be varieties of having everything stripped away from you, which is another form of dying.
Well, you just had
And
that experience, Stephen, recently of
yeah,
fire consuming everything, so you can relate to that.
yeah, January 7th. Yeah. Our house was turned to ashes, and all the books and all the art and all of
Everything, yeah.
everything gone.
So how was that? How was that experience? I know that you're bringing something else, but I think that experience with you and we were talking about fire. I think that's important. What
Yeah.
did that do to you?
Um, well, it wasn't my first rodeo with that sort of loss, but it was for my grandson who had built beautiful Lego things. He had built the owl, of Harry Potter's owl and book and wand and Hogwarts and all of these amazing um, Lego builds, which he did in relationship to his mom and I building these events every year. This pumpkin patch festival, Mr. Bones. So he would mirror that as he grew up from being a little child when he just couldn't wait to start doing something with his hands. And then he was building this fantastic thing. So he's 14 and he just filled the house with them. Well, he went to school and never saw them again. And so that affected me as a grandfather. I really felt the pain as much as I could and knew he had lost it all. But his comment when he's talking with his mother and he says, "Well, Mom, you really wanted to get rid of a lot of stuff." So that probably this took care of it, trying to support her in her pain, and that was endearing. But the most profound thing he said was that this must be the time in my life where I grow, where I
That's good.
have something painful and I'm there for my friends and others who have gone through it. That's the phoenix. That's the twist. That's where the darkness is
The dark
teaching us
force that you
something.
were, yeah, exactly. That's the lesson, and I think this is very important because I mean, life is this. Life is not just just fun and games. Life is this dark force, this transcending through this dark force. So it's very important, and this goes back to everything. If we look at Viktor Frankl and how he survived the concentration camps, it was trying to give meaning, and if you can give meaning to being in that horrible situation, something similar to what Reza lived. I mean, not as close, but being in that maybe that totalitarian, regime that you feel just powerless over. If you don't take the lesson, if you don't learn from it, if you don't make meaning, and this is beautiful what you're saying about your grandson, giving a meaning, even if he's so young and you feeling his pain. But I think that soothed your pain and his mother's pain, your daughter's pain, for him. And I think that event brought you guys together, reflected, even if it was a fire that took, the material away, it brought the unity and the spiritual in you guys.
Yes. Yes.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And remarkably too, when those events happen, people open their hearts and you're the recipient of that energy. And it's phenomenal. Suddenly whoever is around you suddenly knows that you lost everything and they just drop their agenda, drop their, planning and egos and to say, is there anything I can do to help you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Strangers.
Well, that's
And
beautiful. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephen. That was, it just reminds me of when disaster strikes or when, someone dies and you're there, everything else melts away and what's really important, comes to the top, and for that moment, everything that's important, and it just, when you were sharing, it just really made me think that there's a moment in life where you realize the stories that moved you, they weren't just entertainment, right? They were maps, really, right? I mean, as a kid, and I can say I didn't have the language, for archetypes but I felt them. I felt them in my heart. I felt them somewhere really deep. And, I could like almost feel the ache of the outsider, right? Or the pull of the wanderer, or, as Stephen's saying, like this kind of terrifying, almost seduction of the shadow, right? And later I actually then, like all of us, came to understand that, these weren't just characters in a movie, right? They were actually parts of me, trying to make themselves be known, which I'm really grateful for. I think that's actually what myth does best. It gives shape to something that is formless. It takes your inner chaos and it just says, look, there's a pattern here, right? You're not the first to feel this loss or to be this angry or longing, right? The story's already been told, and it's not in a mean way, right? It's more like it's comforting. It's the story
Yeah,
is still being told through you, right?
it's
And so
relatable in a way, right? You
it's
can
what
relate. You can relate to it. That's the
exactly.
word. Yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, look, the first time I saw a character like break down under their own weight or their own mask, right? Like it was someone who looked powerful and controlled, but then was completely shattered, right?
yeah.
It makes you feel exposed, but it also feels like someone's kind of opened a window into your own mind and your own soul. And so I don't know, I feel like that's really when I started to understand that archetypes weren't just symbols of they're not symbols of like who we should be, right? But they're actually a glimpse of who we already are,
Hmm.
right? And little fragments in these stories. And that's very comforting. That's very settling. It's very, you feel part of the world. And that's, I mean, really what I felt when, I wouldn't be able to express it this
Yeah,
way,
yeah,
but
totally.
that's what I felt when I watched Empire Strikes Back.
When it's and when you touch into something which is very important, you can relate, find that there is the same stories within the other people, and that's brotherhood. That's when you can say we're brothers and we live the same, bleed the same, we cry the same. It's
Hmm.
it's it's that. That's
And
beautiful.
we can recognize both like the gods and the monsters in ourselves.
Exactly. Of course. And that's a tricky part. And touching back on the dark force that Steven said, sometimes you have to embody that dark force. And one of the things that I've come to realize, 45 years into my life, is that you can't really kill your dark side. There's a dark side there. You have to kind of embrace it, control it. I see it, and this is an archetype. It's like when you're slaying a dragon. You can go and rescue the princess, and you can slay the dragon, but you can
Mhm.
do it in even better. You can use that dragon, you can subdue that dragon, and use that dragon to your favor.
Mhm.
Write that dragon, and use that dragon against your enemies. So imagine
Mhm.
that it's not you're not just disposing of the dragon, but you're going to be using that force that was so powerful and maybe that would eat you alive to get your purpose. And I think that as long as your purpose is divinely aligned and reaches a higher values, then you're going to be able to dominate that dragon and be able to use it in your favor. I don't know.
That's right. That's right. That's so beautiful. I think it's like both the gods and the monsters, you realize they both have something to teach you.
I noticed a common thread between the stories that Stephen and Risa were telling were basically a spiritual truth I think we mostly know as becoming like a little child. In other words, the openness and the innocence of the child is where we go back to really connect with our true self and our meaning and our connection to spirit and the divine. And I put into the tutor about when you ask the question, are there stories that bind mankind together? And it came up with pretty much the similar thing that you guys were talking about, that yes, there are stories that make us all feel united and together. And one of them is creation. Another one is the universal story of the hero, the journey of the hero or quest for transformation. And it says this archetypal narrative appears in myths and legends and spiritual teachings across the world and throughout history. So it must be in our DNA that we're looking for the hero.
It is.
And,
It is.
and it says it speaks to the individual, but it also makes the individual realize that they belong to everyone. They belong to humanity because we all share the same story. Anyway, I thought that was cool that it came up with that.
I think it's spot on what archetypes are, and this collective consciousness that we talk about. And I want to evolve that collective consciousness concept into the mind, the divine mind, the mastermind, because I believe that our minds are all connected to this, the central mind, and that we draw inspiration from this divine mind. So I think this is what we're talking about, just points into that direction. You want to share something, Carrie?
Yes, thank you. I thought that was so interesting, Susan. I was just thinking about some of the lessons that I've learned and read about from various research, and that as these challenges happen on such a small scale or even a large scale, it's really necessary almost for us to be able to determine how to react to them, for us to use our free will and to use what morals we've been taught to determine how to overcoming all of these issues that are presented to us, this dark side, and to be able to use that lightsaber, to be able to use that light, to be able to grasp the divine from within, to be able to overcome whatever challenges is presented to us.